Hey guys, and welcome to QualityShot. I'm extremely excited to be joined by Steve from the Slice, Sky Sports new correspondent. Well, he's had a nice little segment there, I'm sure you've seen. So going big time, and we're going to be talking about the US Open, and of course, what a tournament on the men's and the women's side as well. We're going to touch on the men's side first. Novak Djokovic and Medvedev making the final. You might say a little bit predictable with number one, number two seed, but I thought a really good tournament in the end. What were your initial thoughts on the tournament from the men's side?
Yeah, thanks again for having me on, Faizan. Happy to be back on QualityShot, one of the best upcoming YouTube channels in the game for tennis, for sure. Yeah, the US Open in general was amazing. So many journalists and fans that I follow or see, were saying this is one of the most competitive. I think they meant like competitive throughout the tournament. Like there's just great matches every single day. And on the men's side, yep, predictable that Djokovic and Medvedev made the final, but I think we like that. Like I think it, with when we have one of the goats like Djokovic still playing, we want the best players to be in the final stages. And on the women's side, it was the opposite of that, but it was arguably even more exciting because of that. So that was super exciting. I know you guys in Britain must be losing their mind. Yeah, that's when I talked to Sky Sports, they were definitely losing their mind. They wanted to talk about every single little piece of Emma Raducanu's life, which is hilarious. And but yeah, the men's side of the game or that tournament, it went almost according to plan. I thought Djokovic was going to get it. I thought he was going to do the Grand Slam. I thought Zverev was his toughest task, and it was a tough match, 5 sets, but I didn't see how, based on their last Grand Slam meeting, Medvedev was going to beat Djokovic. And then what he did was amazing. Medvedev played the perfect match, played the right strategy, and Djokovic didn't have his legs fully there and wasn't able to get away with it on the day.
Yeah, agreed. It's so true about, well, first of all, I guess the kind of massive, celebration around Emma Raducanu, which we'll touch upon later, but also, like you said about the matchups each day, I thought it was incredible. I mean, we had Andy Murray Tsitsipas in the first round, which is an absolute cracker, I thought, and did a stream for that, and it was such a good match. Obviously, a bit of drama involved in there as well, and it was just overall it was just fantastic. And then I thought throughout the whole tournament there were some incredible matches, which I'll get your thoughts upon, and I'm just gonna put you on the spot later on. But I'll give you a heads up now about your match of the tournament and a couple of maybe upsets, etc. as well. I mean, Djokovic not completing the Grand Slam, obviously didn't go according to plan, but an incredible year nonetheless. I mean, 27 matches unbeaten, and I think to win 28 matches in a row in Grand Slams in a calendar year it just proves how tough it is. I mean, Serena Williams fell, obviously, as we know, infamously a few years back in the semi-final in the US Open, and then Djokovic actually went one set further and just fell at the final hurdle.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think of, though, I guess his performance throughout the whole tournament? I thought personally at the start, obviously, dropped some sets against, Holger Rune and Brooksby as well. He went on this run where I know the last 4 matches of the tournament, he just kept on dropping the first set, sorry, even. And there was this ongoing kind of joke that he was just giving the opponent the first set, basically. Yeah. I mean, I thought he played pretty well without playing exceptionally. And then in the Zverev match, there were spurts where he played really well, I thought. And then Zverev kind of gave him that final set, I thought. He maybe mentally was a bit drained and didn't really perform very well. And Djokovic just maintained his level. And then the final, obviously, I thought, as you said, I think his legs were gone, and also mentally, everything just came to a head. And it's like the perfect storm for Medvedev, where Djokovic was just well away from kind of the level that he would have needed. Is that how you saw it as well?
Yeah, I thought Djokovic's nerves throughout the tournament were pretty apparent, and who wouldn't be, obviously. None of those 3 guys are immune to nerves, the big 3 I'm talking about. In the first match against Holger Rune, who's a friend of the show, great kid. I just think in the beginning, the first set of each match, you could almost tell that there was a bit of nerves. Maybe in the second round against Riddenkop, I think it was, didn't seem too bad, but there's a bit of nerves at the beginning of each match, and that's just due to him, the history that he was going for that tournament. I feel like that was his whole career of chasing Federer and Nadal, and now trying to separate from them in a lot of the stats, and the biggest one is the amount of Grand Slams and his one shot at the Grand Slam, basically. So in the final, he was very nervous at the beginning. You could tell. I think he played like a horrific first game, and then somehow it didn't get broken or something. And then he eventually, or no, he did get broken right away. But I think the dropping, it was the joke. We were all talking about, like, it was like that meme where it's like first set happens and then Djokovic leans forward and focuses in the second set and like starts to win. But I think that playing those extra 4 or 5 sets that he maybe didn't have to play by the final time, that was, I think, the biggest difference, because Medvedev just walked through all of his matches basically to the final.
Yeah, Medvedev only dropped 1 set, which I think kind of sums up a little bit. And obviously that was against the Van der Zandschulp. The wildcard did really well. Honourable mention, making the quarterfinals, considering wasn't quite the Karatsev run in the Australian Open earlier this year when he made the semis, but it was pretty damn impressive nonetheless. And I thought, like Djokovic, those extra sets definitely would have caught up with him. And he was in uncharted territory, wasn't he? I mean, the big three have all, Nadal and Federer, have had seasons where they've won 3 out of the 4 slams, but they've never been in the position by the US Open to do it.
Right.
They've always lost earlier in the year. So I think it was almost like, what do I do here? And also, as he said, like, he's never been in the position where he's had an opportunity to get in front of them. So everything, I think, just like came to a head, and it's understandable. Like, he's human, and I guess it showed he's human, because there's question marks around, is he the bionic man? Is he just a machine? But no, he showed that. I think we saw that kind of filter in a little bit at Wimbledon, then throughout the Olympics, obviously, where he didn't perform how he would have liked, and then in that bronze medal match where he kind of lost temper a little bit, and then also going to US Open in the final as well. We saw one thing I wanted to touch, I'll kind of ask you about actually before we kind of move on to the rest of the men's tour is for Djokovic. One thing I thought was really interesting is the crowd. Obviously, I mean, I was watching it and streaming it, and so I didn't really have the sound on. So maybe you might tell me better, but. When he lost the first set, everyone was telling me it's going to happen. He's just going to come back, and then they realized, it's not going to. And another thing they kind of pointed out was the crowd, and obviously the crowd, weirdly, and it's just because of whatever reason, the crowd don't think he's as fan friendly as Federer or Nadal, but for some reason he gets a bit more stick than those two, despite obviously the achievements and accomplishments, and maybe came third. That's why. But the crowd obviously have been on his back a little bit. But then towards the end of that match, when Medvedev had a match point, they cheered the double fault, and then he double faulted again because of it. And I'm like, come on, like, that's, for me. When if they kind of cheer for a double fault, I think that's a bit out of order from my kind of point of view. I think, especially as his first ever match point for a Grand Slam, so first ever championship point, I thought, come on. But what I didn't mind was them then cheering for Djokovic, but it was a bit like, are they cheering him because they just want to see more tennis, or is it actually because they want him to do it? They want this incredible comeback, and they actually want Djokovic to win.
Right.
How did you see it in terms of the dynamic between the crowd and Djokovic throughout the tournament? Did you think maybe he was a little bit hard done by, or do you think actually the crowd were with him against Medvedev and they want him to do it? I mean, what's kind of been the point of view there?
Yeah, the story of the U.S. Open 2021 and Djokovic and the crowd, to me, is like a story of redemption. It was through the tournament they got warmer and warmer to him, because typically, like in the past, like the U.S. Open crowd has really got on Djokovic's back, and obvious, and it proved in this tournament that he does care, and he kind of put out the vibe like, I don't care, like, screw the crowd, but if you watch him through the years, he does this celebration to the crowd every tournament around the world that he does. So he wants to be loved by the crowd. Whereas a guy like Medvedev, I feel like, honestly couldn't care. Remember at 2019 US Open, he was giving them the bird. He was cheer, boo me more, it helps me play better. And then by the end of the US Open, as the tournament went along and kind of he got closer and closer to history, I think the crowd got more and more behind him. And so I thought the crowd was pretty fair in the Zverev match, the Berrettini match. It was pretty pretty fair. And then by the Medvedev match, even when Djokovic smashed his racket in the beginning of the second set, they weren't really on him. They almost like cheered him. They were kind of like they weren't really pro Medvedev in that match, I didn't think. And then by the end, they were they were cheering on. They were giving Medvedev the treatment that Djokovic a lot of the times get. I'm not sure if I care if people cheer on double faults, because to me it's like if you're cheering for one of the players, you're going to cheer every time they win a point, right? And if the other opponent double faults, your guy won a point. So like that's why they do that. I don't really care about that. But what I like, they were like cheering as he was trying to serve. Like Medvedev was going through his first serve, and they're like, oh, like yelling, and then double faulted a couple times, and then got broken. He was up a double break. Imagine if he was only up a single break. That could have changed. Like Djokovic could have come back. Like if Djokovic had won that set, match was even basically, right? So. But then, it was really amazing to see Djokovic get emotional. Like before the match was over, you could tell he was losing. Like he was not going to win this match. Medvedev's a pro now; he's not going to snap mentally, and Djokovic just didn't have it there at the end. But it was cool to see Djokovic he felt embraced by the crowd. He was giving the love back, and then by the very end, like. Once he lost, like you could see the emotions just drop off Djokovic. And, he's crying under the towel, which you can't blame him for, because it's like I think that the crying though was like, it was obviously because he lost the Grand Slam bid. He didn't achieve his objective, but I think it was more like it was also just like years and years of like pent up anger and like frustration with that crowd kind of being released, which is a really beautiful thing to see. To be fair. And just another point about Djokovic, like how amazing his 2021 season was. He wins all three. He's getting the effect now, and he's probably had it for a couple of years, where what Federer used to have, when it was like it wasn't a good year for Federer unless he won 3 of the slams. Like he could win 2 of the slams, they'd be like, that was an okay year. And like I remember talking about that and be like, that just shows how great you are, because that's your expectation. You have to win 3 or 2 or 3 or 4 of the slams. And Djokovic, like people are saying like, oh, he failed this year, etc. But imagine saying that he failed when he won 3 of the 4 slams, won 27 out of the 28 possible matches, and just came up a little short. Like still like an unbelievable season for him. It could have gone a lot different. He could have lost Australia. He could have lost French Open. He did lose the US Open, so he could be sitting at 18 slams pretty easily right now. But he's at 20, and I have a feeling he's going to get a couple more at least.
Yeah, agreed. I think obviously just showing I think in the big moments, right, in those slams, because I think a lot of the Wimbledon, I think Australian Open he played some pretty damn good tennis. But in the French Open, I think Wimbledon and US Open, there were times where I maybe probably didn't play his best tennis, for sure. But then in the big moments, he just kind of came up clutch, as people would say. So I thought that's where. And that's what's been the difference and separated him from the rest. And as you said, like I think it's funny, people call it a failure, but it's just a bit of a joke to call it that, because realistically, if he had lost the French Open to Nadal, say Nadal went and won that one, and he lost in that semi-final, I think people would have been like, okay, that's understandable. And then he gone on to win the other 2, in Wimbledon and the US Open. They would have called it a fantastic year, and they would have said, well, lost the French. But then people don't realize that actually his record in the US Open is still good, but he's won it 3 times, so it's actually not as good as his record at the Australian Open or Wimbledon. So it's his 3rd best tournament, just in front of the French Open. So and arguably people will say, well, actually, if you look at the gap between himself and the rest on the hard courts, and the gap between him and the rest on clay with Nadal, it's probably a lot bigger on clay. So. I think he's had a phenomenal year nonetheless, and obviously one of the things that he might look back on and with regret is maybe the Olympic run, but I think he was just absolutely cooked by that time anyway, and it was a big ask. Okay, enough about Djokovic then. Medvedev, I mean, how good was that maiden Grand Slam win? And obviously, as I said, only dropped a set. Did have a pretty good run, I think we have to say, to the final. Like it wasn't the hardest run. I thought obviously in that semi-final against FA had chance. I think it was the second set. He was 5-3 up and a break, and that was it. And I was thinking he's going to take this set. It's going to be really close. He's got a chance here. He just kind of threw it away, really. And I have to hate to say it, but bottled it a little bit. I thought personally, and then after that, Medvedev just ran with the momentum. And I thought that was just like that was the moment where if he was going to get upset, it was going to be there. And it was going to be a close match, but if they didn't quite have it, how do you see the tournament for Medvedev? I mean, was it just the case? It looked like it was just the one word is clinical from him throughout the whole tournament.
Yeah, that it was clinical for him, and as the tournament went on, you saw Djokovic kind of struggling a little bit in each match, but then you saw Zverev and Medvedev just cruising, and that to me, I was like, it was just because I had those two guys. I put some money on Zverev and Medvedev just because of the odds at the beginning, and it was like very clear to me that these guys were going to be a problem in this tournament, and they're no longer in the position that even Felix is in, where Felix was in the semifinals of the Slam for the first time. So it's so hard, I think, for these young guys to get it out of their mind that it's okay for me to lose. Yeah, I made it to the semifinals. Yeah, if I lose here, it's like, well, no one expected me to win. It's like, you're never going to win that way. And I don't think they think that, but it seems that way. Like, they lose so quickly and they lose so fast. And I'm not disappointed with Felix. Like, he's my guy. Like, he's Canadian. Like, he's a legend. And I think he's going to be like, he's slowly getting one step at a time, further and further in slams, which is great to see. But yeah, should have won that second set. And then I think one set all. And then I think he can step up and start not treating it like a Grand Slam match anymore. Cause like, it's just 3 sets. He's got to like play his game, and he could have relaxed a bit and played. And I think Felix had the game to beat Medvedev straight up. He'd beat him before in a 3-set match. So that was disappointing for me, but it's the experience that counts in these slams, and Medvedev had it in that match, and he figured out a way to do it against Van de Zandschulp. I just feel like Medvedev fell asleep for that one set. Van de Zandschulp started playing really good, and then Medvedev was like, wait, what's going on here? And then checked back in and then won. So yeah, he definitely had an easier draw than Djokovic, based on the fact that Zverev was on Djokovic's side. That was the only person that was going to touch Medvedev, I think, on the bottom, and I think he still would have won. And then yeah, in the final, he played the perfect way that he had to play. It was interesting hearing his coach talk about the matchup and saying he wasn't really, like he said in Australia, like Medvedev somehow didn't really get up for the final. It seemed like he didn't have his A game. He didn't have his energy, and he obviously did in at the US Open, but he played with the tactics where he just like locked down, and he was going to do what Djokovic does to other players. And we've seen him do that before to him. But if you notice, like a lot of the balls he was hitting, like when backhand to backhand rallies were like so common in that match. And he was never trying to rip backhand winner up the line. He was kind of keeping it in like the third court, like in the middle kind of part of the court to Djokovic's backhand to not give him angle, kind of keeping it almost slower so that Djokovic had to hit harder, because that, makes Djokovic take more risk. And Djokovic doesn't ideally like to be doing that. He can obviously do it, but on that day without his legs, it was harder for him to do it. And then we saw him make a lot more mistakes than common. And then, yeah, he just served like a boss, like didn't get broken until the match was over, basically. And that's not to say that Medvedev or Djokovic didn't have amazing chances to break. Like beginning of the second set, Djokovic loses the first set, and we're like, okay, here comes Djokovic. And then he has love 40 on Medvedev's serve, doesn't break because Medvedev, he like hit this one preposterous forehand up the line. Maybe it was a backhand up the line, I forget. And then just a few good points by Medvedev, a few shaky, kind of not uncharacteristic points from Djokovic to not break there. And then we're like, oh, this is different. Medvedev held his own, and now he's broken. Now it's 2 sets to love. This is not Musetti. This is not Tsitsipas, who's going to maybe give up a 2-set to love lead easily, because Medvedev's this is his 3rd slam final. It wasn't his first. So he was no longer of that mindset where I think, oh, I made it this far. I'm playing the all-time great. Like, I can lose this. He was like, if I don't win this match, it's a failure. Like, this tournament's a failure for me. And I think that was his mindset coming in, and his experience helped him, I think, navigate those very choppy waters against even a B-level Djokovic is going to beat 95% of the players on tour, right? Like, if Djokovic was playing anyone else in the tournament in that final with that level, I think he probably would have won. Maybe not Zverev, but basically anyone else. So Medvedev did very well, deserved to be the champion. And yeah, it's pretty crazy now that he's like a straight up Grand Slam champion. Now going into the Australian Open, we'll have him. Hopefully Dominic Thiem gets back to form. It's been super sad to not see him, because I was hoping, he won the US Open last year. I'd love to see him make another impact this year, but Medvedev's officially in the big leagues now.
Yeah, agreed. I think he definitely would have seen it as a failure if he hadn't managed to wrap up the win. I think just his mindset, and given that he's now number 2 seed as well, I feel like he has really owned it, and he's like,
Yeah.
I belong here. And mentally, he's definitely seems like a giant. And obviously with the dead fish celebration as well, which is I thought was hilarious. And for those of you playing FIFA, you'll definitely know it. But yeah,
That was insane. I couldn't believe he did that. Like it looks like you would get like that would hurt. Like okay, he's
yeah,
luckily all he had to do after that was drink because like I'm sure he was hurting.
yeah, his shoulder would have been hurt, to be wouldn't have cared, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But he seems like a very fresh new character, someone who, as you said, doesn't really care too much about what other people think, and
Mhm.
very blunt, very honest. And I think he will be a bit like Marmite, for sure. Like some people will love him, some people hate him, but I like him. I think he's really good for tennis. I think he's good for the tour.
Mhm.
And I think let's hope that Tsitsipas and him. Tsitsipas can kind of raise his level, because that's a rivalry definitely that I think even Medvedev said he really relishes, and obviously they don't like each other, but he said it's good for tennis. And Zverev, as he said, like I think Djokovic beats, as he said, anyone apart from Zverev or Medvedev playing his B level there. To wrap up on the ATP tour then side of things anyway, quickly then, I want to get a few categories on and get your opinions on. So first of all, your breakthrough player from the tournament.
Yeah, I'd probably say Felix. I thought the way he made making a semifinals big, and the way he played, I think is going to translate super well going forward. He was different. He played with much better serving, much better returning, I thought, and he came forward very confidently at this tournament. Was super good at the net. So he played. He's told me before in press conferences, he's like, because sometimes you watch Felix and you're like, what's your game plan, or like what's your kind of identity as a tennis player right now? Because it seems like he's hitting the ball hard, but he's kind of stays on the baseline, doesn't really move forward through his shots a lot of the time. And he's like, yeah, I'm an aggressive player. And then I think in this U.S. Open, he really found out what it means, or he really acted like he was an aggressive player. Like when he had a forehand, he was actually going to do something with it and then come forward and like put it away. And then he was serving so big that he was getting like 1 or 2 free points every single service game, which puts you on the level of Djokovic, right? Or Federer or Medvedev, or these guys you should be getting at least an ace or a couple on return service per game. Just helps you like every part of your game so much. So I think he was my breakout player. Maybe biased because he's Canadian, but also I just like he's like taking a proper step. Like Van der Zandschulp, great breakthrough, but I don't expect him to keep doing this.
Yeah, I think for me, Alcaraz actually I thought was really impressive. Quarterfinals, and obviously played FA and then had to retire injured. I think he probably would have lost that anyway, but what a run from him. And that leads me quite nicely on to after talking about Baby Nadal, on to upset of the tournament.
Upset of the tournament. It's hard to think now. Like looking back, there was a few big upsets, but I think like the players that were really contenders made it through. So I think maybe Shapovalov getting upset by Lloyd Harris like early on. Like
that was a big one.
Again, Shapovalov, like I thought based on how he played at Wimbledon, thought he'd do better, but he had a horrible hardcourt season before the U.S. Open, and then Lloyd Harris like played super well. So I think his ranking deserves to be a lot higher. And against Shapovalov, it's kind of a nightmare matchup when Lloyd's playing like that. You can't really hit through him. He hits big himself, and with the one-handed backhand, it's just way more of a risk. So I'd say probably that match. There's probably another one that I'm like not thinking of, but on the women's side, there was like a million big upsets, obviously.
Yeah. Lloyd Harris has had a fantastic year, so I thought it was really fitting. I know you would have been upset about a Shapovalov loss, but I wasn't surprised. Let's put it that way. He's had a ridiculous year. But Alcaraz Tsitsipas, I thought was a ridiculously amazing match. First of all, did the whole stream for that, and also a big upset. Obviously, I know no one really gave him a hope in hell really of winning that match, and then I was like, oh, can he do it? Can he do it? And I think maybe because I'm a bit biased, because I'm a little bit of a Nadal fan as well. So he's from the Rafa Nadal Academy and has that kind of similar energy. But did say that he's more just game around Federer. So and you can see a little bit of the forehand, can't you?
Oh yeah, big forehand. Everyone talks about the flat, straight arm when he hits the ball. The ball comes off different when you hit the ball like that. Like it's big time. And I think that was the upset of the tournament. I just kind of forgot about that in the moment. But Alcaraz taking out Tsitsipas, huge. huge, and it was an amazing match. Tsitsipas should have had that match. He had no business losing that match based on what I saw. Like, I forget how it went, but I think in the third set he was up 5-2 and lost that set. Bageled the next set, should have been over then, but it was a bit of a not a choke from. I mean, is that a choke? 5-2 to lose the set. It's a bit of a choke. He got it back right away, and then I think the fifth set was a tiebreaker. Yeah. So could have gone either way still, but you're in the position there. You're the more experienced player. I think you got to pull through in that match. But anyways, great. All props to Carlos Alcaraz, because that was big time.
Yeah, I agree. I think it ebbed and flowed a lot. Like their form kind of like dipped, and it was then went higher, and it's such a intriguing match, I thought, for me.
Yeah.
And I guess lastly, then the match of the tournament for you was the match of the tournament.
Yeah, maybe that one. Yeah, probably that one. Or I thought Zverev Djokovic was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Like just big, clean hitting. Like it was. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, it's just like a boring match. Neither guy's at their top level." I think it was just super high level tennis where both guys don't miss, and it was interesting to see the their levels ebbed and flowed too. Like it wasn't like the most high level crazy match, but there was some pretty animalistic rallies in there. Like that one that Zverev won, I think it was like over 50 shots or something. Like preposterous. So that was a great match. There was so many though. Like there was really so many. I can't even think of them all. So the final was pretty good, I thought too. But based on just because it wasn't like a long match doesn't matter. Like it could have been a long match, but Medvedev played very well.
Yeah, agreed. I think people kind of think, maybe forget that most 5-set matches, even the great ones, it's not a super high level throughout all 5 sets.
Right.
It's very, very hard to maintain that level for 5 sets. For a player to just play at optimum level for 5 straight sets is impossible almost.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think maybe people have got sport a little bit with some of the matchups. So in the past, in the last kind of 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it is.
Totally.
On to women's then quickly. So obviously, I'm going to gloat about it a little bit. Raducanu winning the final.
Yeah.
What a win! I mean, obviously everyone's been talking about it, so I won't kind of bore the viewers too much with it because I'm sure they've heard a lot about it. But obviously, the first qualifier to win a Grand Slam, she was the first qualifier to make the final. She's the first Brit since Virginia Wade in I think it was 1977 when she won Wimbledon. To win a slam as well. Liliana Fernandez as well, like incredible to get through. She also was unseeded going into the tournament. But to make the final was an unbelievable performance. And realistically, her route to the final was a lot tougher. I mean, Raducanu didn't face a single top 10 player. She faced Sakari and Bencic, who was obviously the Olympic gold medalist. Sakari's had a good year as well, made the semi-final of the French Open. So like not an easy run, but a much easier run in comparison to Fernandez, who faced Osaka, beat her in 3 sets. Faced Sabalenka, faced Alina, faced Kerber. All of those matches as well, winning them in 3 sets rather than 2. So Raducanu didn't drop a single set throughout the whole tournament, which again, incredible stat. Whereas Fernandez went into that having to kind of fight. I think it was the last 4 matches she'd had 3-set matches, so went into that probably with a little bit more fatigue and also just probably a little bit of mental fatigue. But a lot of people, and I thought for me, she had a slight edge considering the people she played. But I think she just couldn't stop the momentum from Raducanu. How did you make the whole tournament? Just kind of your initial thoughts on it.
Well, it's impossible to overstate how unbelievable the run is from Raducanu to qualify. Like the only tennis player ever to qualify for a major and win it, right? So you're trying to explain that to like non-tennis fans, like my family or whatever, like my wife who's watching, they're like, it would be like somebody Monday qualifying for like the British Open and then winning it by like 10 strokes or something. Like it's like, because she like destroyed the field on the top half. Yes, she had an easier run definitely than Fernandez, but amazing from Raducanu. And it's just like, it's weird. It kind of like blows your own mind. You're like, you kind of start to think like, is this normal? Yeah, she's just winning tennis matches. What's so hard about winning tennis matches? She's like a pro tennis player. It's like, well, the pressure's supposed to get to them at some point, and it's supposed to be hard to do. But Raducanu's got this like classic game, right? Like smooth strokes, both sides. Just everything's good. She was like the perfect build for a tennis player. And then I think it was kind of like the Djokovic Medvedev thing, where Djokovic came in the final tired. I think Leila Annie Fernandez came in more exhausted than Raducanu for sure, and then Raducanu has a bit more power, so it was gonna be another match where Leila Annie had to like figure out how to use the power against her, and she just couldn't really like figure it out on that day. She did get a couple breaks. Like, it was actually a pretty close match.
Yeah.
It seemed like straightforward, but it was. I thought Leila Annie was going to win that second set for sure. Got the early break. But so I just think, again, a bit deflated on the final for her, but such an amazing run. Like, arguably a more impressive run, because she went through like Osaka, Kerber, Svitolina, Sabalenka. So just for us, the Canadian, I'm calling it, she's the Canadian queen. Leila Annie Fernandez, she runs New York. Like, I don't know if you saw her, like, just out, the crowd loved her. She'd do her little like this pumps whenever she got a point. And then at the end, in her runner-up speech, she says, "I wish I could." She's like, "My goal is to be as strong as New Yorkers have been ever since 9/11, and they lost their minds." I was like, "Yes, Leila Annie runs New York, but maybe Emma Raducanu actually does. I don't know." But we were stoked as a Canadian. It's preposterous that Bianca Andreescu won the U.S. Open 2 years ago, and then and then Leila Annie made the final. Like that, both those girls came out of nowhere to be in those positions as well. So the women's tournament, it was like the tournament of the young girls. Obviously, all the big seeds got upset, but there was a lot of just great matches throughout there. So that's my very cluttered wrap up of the women's.
I thought it was one of the best kind of Grand Slams from the women's side I've seen in a while, and I think
totally
it was just because of those two coming through. It was just really refreshing. They're both so young, 18 and 19 years of age. Raducanu is just like the way that she strikes. Well, I think you made the comparison in one of your previous videos, which was a young Sharapova, and there is a little bit of that. Slightly different, but I think the way that she has easy power on both sides, on the forehand and backhand side. She's not a huge server, but she's big enough that she can get a few aces throughout the match, and also a couple of unreturned serves. Hits her spots quite nicely. Seems to be, not super uncomfortable at the net as well. Same with Fernandez as well. And I think both of them have contrasting styles, but it made a really good matchup. I don't think either played their like optimum level of tennis in that final, but there were some really good points, I thought. And it ebbed and flowed, and you could see that the nerves played their part. A couple of broken serves. There are a lot of juice games in that final, so it could have definitely gone the other way and Fernandez winning that, but I think the juice games for the most part, Raducanu got through those, won those juice games, which I thought made the difference. But I'm gonna ask you the question, and I think this is very, very, I think I'm gonna take this with a pinch of salt, the people and listeners, but obviously we've had some incredible rivalries, especially in the men's game recently. Obviously Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, Nadal as well. Does this have the potential to be that? I think obviously these guys, it could be a flash in the pan. We don't know. I think signs are saying that it's probably not going to be, given the kind of like state of women's tennis at the moment. What do you think? Does it have the potential to be a similar kind of rivalry? Because we haven't really seen too many rivalries in women's tennis recently where it's been like a dominant rivalry.
Yeah, it's hard to say, and it's really hard to compare them to obviously the three GOATs on the men's side, as they've played like 50 times each. So we'll have to wait and see for that. But obviously the next time, I hope both these ladies can keep their form. I hope they can both be in the top 10 super fast. And I hope they play a lot more big matches on the biggest stages like this, because it's a super interesting tennis dynamic between, Emma Raducanu having more power, bigger strokes, but Emma or Leila Annie being able to use that and like really counterpunch nicely. And they're both charismatic. They're both stars. Like, they're both like got the look, so I think totally it can be a rivalry. They just have to both keep up their level. Like, we've seen Ostapenko win a slam, drop off. Sloane Stephens win a slam, drop off. Madison Keys. So it's like, it's there's precedence for these women like dropping off, but I just hope it doesn't happen. And I could see, anytime they play going forward, people are going to be hyped, and it's going to be really good for women's tennis. And I think if both these women can manage to stay on their game and improve, even, I think they could. I don't know if they could go on to dominate tennis, because I think a lot of a lot of Leila's wins this tournament were like kind of surprises, like the opponent didn't really know how to play Leila Annie, and then it was just over. Like, and then Raducanu had a fairly simple run through the top, but the fact that it was so simple for her shows, I think, that she's on a different level of tennis than most of those girls. So yeah, we haven't seen someone really separate themselves in the women's draw since Serena was kind of dominating. So will be interesting to see. But yeah, I hope there's a big rivalry brewing.
Yeah, agreed. I think Osaka kind of did it a little bit on the hard courts in the last few years, but then she hasn't done it throughout all the tournaments. I think all the slams. So she struggled on the clay and the grass. So that's interesting. But yeah, I agree with Raducanu and Fernandez. I think the biggest thing for me was the mental toughness shown. I said it throughout all my videos throughout the whole tournament. It was really impressive. The level of maturity shown at their age was a maturity I think that most players don't have. Even kind of in their late 20s,
right?
And there's maturity and kind of a strength of mind. Like Raducanu, for example, was down in a lot of her opening sets of breakdown, and then she'd go on and win that set. And then obviously, we also had what I thought was really refreshing is the smiling and the kind of happiness. And a lot of people have their own things. Obviously, Nadal, for example, is a good example. He doesn't always smile, but he's got different energies. He's good.
Yeah.
But these are two girls who are young and they just look like they were enjoying it.
Yeah.
And they made it look easy because it's the biggest stage, right? A Grand Slam, and they just made it look easy, smiling, etc., which is fantastic. I thought it was a massive missed opportunity for Sabalenka as well in that semi-final. Probably the best opportunity she would have ever had recently to win a slam.
Yeah.
I thought she would be, and she was notably upset after that loss to Fernandez as well. I thought. To wrap up then, because I don't want to take up too much of your time, we'll just go through, I guess, like we did with the men's. What was for you? Who was the breakout player? I mean, I think there's obviously the obvious answer.
Yeah.
But maybe give that and maybe another player that isn't as obvious, I guess.
Man, I don't know. All of my attention was focused on those two women in the final. So breakout player number 1, Emma Raducanu. Breakout player number 2, Leilani Fernandez. That's really all I guess. Yeah, that's like really all I can think of at this point because it's just they're the whole story. So yeah, just those two.
That's fair enough. Match of the tournament.
Match of the tournament was there was a lot. I felt like who was it? Leila Annie versus Sabalenka was crazy, but Leila Annie versus Kerber was super high level. I thought, and I think I heard a lot of people saying that was the best level because they're both lefties. If I'm not mistaken, Kerber's lefty, right?
Yeah,
and they both have like that similar like drop low forehand thing.
Yeah.
I think it's battled really hard. It was a great match, like veteran versus the newcomer. So I'd say Kerber, Fernandez.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I actually think I really enjoy Fernandez Sabalenka. You mentioned that. I thought that was a really, really good match. I thought it could have gone either way. And the way that Fernandez came back, I think she was breaks down like in I think the last 2 sets and managed to come back and recover. Obviously, she lost I think it was the second set she lost, and then the third set she went on to win, and it was just really impressive. Like I was super impressed with her kind of fortitude throughout the whole that whole match. To be fair, and it was a really good level, I thought.
Yeah.
And kind of lastly, then I guess who was so we said about breakthrough player, we said about match of the tournament, upset of the tournament.
I think Fernandez taking out Osaka. Like Osaka was, I mean, she with her mental struggles through the summer, like it wasn't maybe as like she wasn't expected to win necessarily, but I mean, Osaka has been the best hardcourt player in the world for the women's tennis for sure the last few years, and Fernandez taking her out was big time. So to me, that's the biggest upset of the tournament. Yeah,
agreed. I think it's really hard to disagree with that. Barty, I think losing to Rogers was a huge upset as well. I thought
that's true. Yeah,
that was big, but I think the kind of how dominant Osaka's been on the hard courts, I think it definitely was symbolic. I thought for sure, like Barty hasn't won a Grand Slam on the hard courts yet, so I don't think it's as much of an upset. Yeah, thanks very much, Stephen, for being on. I do appreciate it. It's been amazing having you on as always. Is there anything you want to touch on before we wrap up?
No, I think I can't wait for the rest of the year, and next year's Australian Open is going to be lit. I think if it happens, the Australians have got to figure out they've been botching it with COVID
It's the same situation as last year.
Oh my gosh, it's so embarrassing. But so I don't know if they'll have it. there's been talk that they might have it in like Dubai or something, like the Australian Open in Dubai.
Players would love that, to be fair.
I'm sure they probably would, yeah. But would it be the Australian Open? Like, I don't know. So I don't know. I'm just excited for the rest of the year. Thanks for having me on, Faison. I love chatting about it over here on the Slice, and yeah, it's been great.
No, thanks again, mate. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to the rest of the year, the ATP Tour World Finals as well. I'm not sure who will be playing in that. I'm not sure Djokovic will play in it, but I'm sure he will. Medvedev as well, of course. And it's always a nice little curtain closer, I think, the ATP World Tour Finals. And obviously, we've got the Laver Cup as well going on, which is always good fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot, mate. Really appreciate it. Guys, if you haven't already, which I'm sure you have, go and check out Stephen on the Slice on YouTube and also his website as well. Of course, does merchandise, bagel mugs, all sorts. And of course, writes lots of articles as well. And is becoming famous on Sky Sports. So you got to go and check him out before I guess before you get left behind. So
before you get left behind, but maybe I'll come to you guys in the UK and I'll just be on Sky Sports.
You should.
I'll just move there.
You should. Yeah, you may as well, mate. You may as well. But yeah, and also do like and subscribe to QualityShot if you don't mind, as well. Really does help us out a huge amount. Thank you very much. And yeah, Stephen, you're welcome in the UK anytime, mate.
Amazing. I appreciate it. If I get there, we'll definitely do a match or something like that in person. It'd be good. But yeah, thanks for having me on, man.
No worries, mate.